Help me reach 10,000 subscribers by sharing this video with someone you think needs to hear it today. It would mean the world to me, and it helps this message reach more men who could truly benefit from thinking about these ideas carefully. There comes a point in many men's lives when the storm finally settles. The alarm clock that used to pull them out of bed before the sun came up loses its power. The long grind of building a career, showing up every single day, and chasing one goal after another starts to feel like a distant memory. The kids who used to fill the house with noise and laughter and the occasional headache have grown up and started their own journeys. The pressure that sat on the chest of a young man like a boulder, the pressure to prove himself, to be strong, to be successful, to measure up to what the world expected, begins to fade into something much quieter and much more manageable. For the first time in perhaps 30 or 40 years, a man can look out the window in the morning and ask himself what he actually wants to do with this day. Not what his boss wants, not what his family needs, not what society is expecting him to achieve, just what he, as a person who has earned his rest and his freedom, truly wants. That feeling is one of the greatest gifts that life has to offer. But here is where something interesting and often heartbreaking tends to happen. Right at this moment, when peace is finally within reach, many men make a decision that redirects the entire course of their remaining years. They meet someone new, there is a spark. There is laughter and conversation, and the warm feeling of being seen by another person. And before long, the idea of getting married again starts to feel like the most natural thing in the world. Everyone around them seems to agree. Friends shake their hands and smile. Family members talk about how wonderful it is. The movies and the television shows and the people on the news all seem to celebrate this kind of story. A man finds love again later in life and the world applauds. Nobody stops to ask the harder question. Nobody sits down across from this man and says, "Wait a moment. Is getting married at 60 or 65 or 70 truly the same thing it was when you were 30? Is the promise that used to feel like safety now going to feel like a chain?" This conversation almost never happens, and that silence costs a lot of men more than they ever expected. The very first thing that catches most men off guard has nothing to do with feelings. It has everything to do with what happens to the life they spent decades building the second they sign a marriage certificate. By the time a man reaches his 60s, he has usually accumulated something real and meaningful. Maybe it is a house that is finally paid off. Maybe it is a retirement account he fed carefully for 30 years. Maybe it is a pension, some investments, or simply the comfort of knowing that his financial future is stable and protected. Those things did not arrive by accident. They came from decades of discipline, sacrifice, and hard choices. What many men do not fully understand is that marriage is not just a romantic promise. It is a legal contract, and the moment that contract is signed, the rules about everything he owns change in ways he probably never sat down and thought through. The house, the savings, the inheritance he planned to leave for his children, the medical decisions, the tax situation, all of it becomes tangled up with another person in ways that can take years and enormous amounts of money to untangle if things go wrong. People who help others plan their finances and lawyers who deal with family situations have watched this play out over and over again. A man walks into a new marriage thinking about companionship and happiness. He walks out of a broken one shocked by how complicated and expensive it turned out to be. The problem is that nobody wants to talk about these things when love is in the air. It feels cold and unromantic to sit across from someone you care about and discuss what happens if this doesn't work out. But the men who skip that conversation are often the ones who pay the heaviest price later, and money is really just the beginning. What many men slowly discover, usually after they have already moved in together and started building a shared life, is that what they valued most was not something they thought to protect before it was gone. Freedom. Not the dramatic kind of freedom from movies, the simple, quiet, deeply personal freedom to live a day exactly the way you want to live it. The freedom to decide on a Tuesday morning that you are going to drive somewhere you have never been. The freedom to eat what you want, sleep when you want, spend your time on whatever brings you joy, and keep your home the way you like it without negotiating every detail with another person. After years of putting everyone else first, this freedom feels like a treasure. Many men only realize just how much they value it once they have given it away. Because living with another person, especially two people who have each spent 50 or 60 years developing their own habits, routines, and ways of doing things, is not a simple adjustment. It is a daily renegotiation. Small things that never seemed like a big deal before suddenly become points of tension. How the kitchen should be organized, when the television should be turned off, how money should be spent, what the weekend should look like. Neither person in this situation is a villain. The issue is simply that two fully formed lives do not always fit together neatly, and the older we get, the more set in our ways we tend to become. What started as a beautiful connection can slowly be buried under an avalanche of small frustrations and unspoken expectations. Many men look back and realize they were not missing a marriage at all. They were missing a connection, and those two things, though they often get confused for each other, are not the same. Then there is the family dimension, which is something almost nobody prepares for. A man might think he is making a private decision between himself and a new partner, but the truth is that a marriage after 60 sends ripples out in every direction. His grown children are watching. His grandchildren are affected. Old family dynamics shift. Loyalties get tested. In many cases, adult children genuinely want their father to be happy. But happiness and comfort are different things. And when a new person steps into the family legally, anxieties can surface that nobody expected. Children begin to wonder about the inheritance they were promised. They worry about being pushed to the side. They do not know this new person, and they may not be sure whether their father is making a clear-headed decision or being swept up in something that feels good right now, but might not end well. Even when nobody says these things out loud, the feeling hangs in the room. Family gatherings start to feel different. Conversations become more careful. The ease that used to exist gets replaced by something more cautious. And when both partners bring their own large families into the mix, the situation becomes even more complicated. Suddenly, there are two entire networks of people with their own histories, expectations, and feelings. And the man in the middle is expected to bridge all of it while also trying to keep his new marriage happy and healthy. This is not what most men had in mind when they imagined their peaceful later years. There is also the health dimension, and this is one that people almost never bring up before a wedding, but often wish they had discussed much more honestly. When you marry at 30, you and your partner are both in most cases healthy and capable. You have decades ahead of you to grow together and face challenges as a team. When you marry at 65, the rules are completely different. Neither person can predict with any certainty what their health will look like in 5 years or 10 years. Bodies change. Illnesses arrive without warning. Conditions that were manageable become serious. And when two people are married, the healthy partner takes on a responsibility for the one who is struggling. This is not a criticism of that kind of caregiving. Many people consider it one of the most meaningful things a human being can do, but it is a reality that must be honestly considered before the decision is made. A man who married imagining trips and shared hobbies and long evenings talking about life may find himself years later spending his days managing medications, attending appointments, and carrying a physical and emotional weight he never truly prepared himself for. And of course, the same could happen in reverse. The point is not that love should disappear when difficulty arrives. The point is that this stage of life, more than any other, requires an honest reckoning with what you are actually committing to, not just the beautiful version of it, but the full version. Here is the deeper truth that sits underneath all of these practical concerns. By the time a man has lived 60 or more years, the thing he is really searching for is not always what he thinks it is. He might call it love. He might call it companionship. But if you sit with it long enough, if you really dig into what he is feeling, what most men are actually looking for is peace. Not the absence of people or warmth or connection, but the presence of calm. A life where the mornings feel gentle, where there is no constant pressure or conflict or compromise eating away at his energy, where he can look around at the life he has built and genuinely satisfied with it. The mistake that many men make is believing that another marriage is the path to that feeling. They see the loneliness, and they want to fix it as fast as possible. And marriage feels like the obvious fix because that is what society has always told them. But loneliness and the need for marriage are two separate problems that require two very different solutions. Loneliness is the absence of meaningful connection. Marriage is a legal, financial, and lifestyle contract that changes nearly everything about how you live. You can solve loneliness without signing that contract. You can build deep friendships, spend time with grandchildren, join communities, travel, pursue things that make you feel alive, and invite people into your life in ways that fill that empty space without creating a new set of obligations that slowly drain your peace away. The men who tend to be the happiest in this stage of life are not necessarily the ones who got married again. They are the ones who took the time to build a life they genuinely loved, living on their own terms first. They did not rush to find someone to complete them. They completed themselves. And then, from that strong and settled place, they allowed someone else to be a part of their world, to share in its joy without needing to restructure the whole thing to accommodate them. The relationships that grow out of that kind of confidence and self-knowledge tend to be the most genuine. They are not driven by fear of being alone. They are driven by actual desire, actual choice, and actual compatibility. Two people who are already happy choosing to spend time together is a very different thing than two people who are both afraid of loneliness, clinging to each other, hoping the other person can make the feeling stop. There are men who marry again after 60 and find it to be one of the best decisions they ever made. This is absolutely true, and it would be wrong to pretend otherwise. But the men who find that kind of success are usually the ones who went into it with open eyes. They talked about the hard things before they signed anything. They made legal arrangements to protect their children and their assets. They gave the relationship real time to develop before rushing toward a ceremony. They asked themselves honestly whether this was something they truly wanted or whether they were just trying to escape a feeling. And they chose someone who made their existing life richer rather than someone who required them to give that life up entirely. The question that every man should sit with quietly and honestly before making this kind of decision is simple but powerful. Does this relationship make the life I have already built genuinely better? Or am I hoping it will fix something inside me that I have not yet fixed on my own? That question requires real honesty. Not the kind of honesty you perform for other people, but the kind you have to face when you are completely alone with your own thoughts in the quiet of the morning. The answer to that question, whatever it turns out to be, is the most important piece of information a man can have before he decides what to do next. The goal of all of this is not to tell any man to stay away from love. Love is real and valuable and one of the finest things a human life can contain at any age. The goal is simply to say that love does not require a legal contract to be genuine. It does not require a ceremony or a shared bank account or a piece of paper to be meaningful. A man can love deeply, share his life generously, be a true companion and partner to another person, and still keep the independence and peace he worked his whole life to earn. Choosing each day to be with someone because you genuinely want to be, rather than because a contract says you might be the most honest and most loving way to spend the years you have left. Take your time, think carefully, trust what you have learned over a lifetime of living. And please, if this gave you something worth thinking about, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and help me get to 10,000 subscribers so we can keep having these honest conversations together.